Welcome viewers, I am Ernst Kaltenbrunner, a name that history has not forgotten. You are about to embark on a journey into the depths of one of history's darkest eras, through the eyes of one who stood at its very heart. My story is one of power, intrigue, and a fall from the heights of the Nazi hierarchy to the gallows of Nuremberg. As you delve into the complexities of a world torn by war and the inner workings of a regime marked by unspeakable atrocities, I challenge you to ponder the choices made and the paths taken. But this is not just a tale of the past. It is a reminder of the consequences of unchecked power and the importance of justice. As you watch, I urge you to reflect, to question, and to understand. Your likes, comments, and subscriptions will not just honor the gravity of this narrative, but also ensure that such stories remain in our collective consciousness, serving as a cautionary tale for future generations. So, hit that like button, subscribe, and join me in unraveling the complexities of a time that should never be forgotten. Your engagement is not just appreciated, it is essential. Let's ensure that the lessons of history are never lost. Welcome to a journey through the annals of one of the most tumultuous times in human history. Born on October 4, 1903, in Ried im Innkreis, Upper Austria, not far from Salzburg and the German border, I entered a world on the brink of monumental change. My father Hugo, a respected lawyer, and my mother, Therese Odvardi, raised me alongside my brothers Friedrich, Werner, and Roland. Childhood for me was typical of the time, uneventful, yet immersed in the nationalist fervor of our family home, a sentiment deeply aligned with the Austro-Hungarian Empire's vision. My educational journey took me from the quaint town of Raab to the bustling city of Linz, to the halls of the Real Gymnasium, a prestigious school founded back in 1851 under the Austrian imperial government. Here, history whispers in the corridors. Adolf Hitler, a name destined to echo through history, was once a student here, and Adolf Eichmann, my future ally, walked these very halls alongside me. The world I grew up in was a tapestry of political upheavals. The unification of German states into an empire in 1871 had already set the stage for a power shift in Europe, challenging even the mighty British Empire. As alliances formed and tensions rose, the summer of 1914 marked the ignition of a conflict that would engulf the world, the First World War. Though only a boy of 10, the war's echoes would shape my destiny. The war's end in 1918 signaled not just the defeat of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Germany, but also the disintegration of a centuries-old order. The Republic of German Austria emerged, briefly flirting with the idea of unification with Germany, an aspiration crushed by the Treaty of Saint-Germain. In the wake of this turmoil, I turned my eyes towards academia, initially pursuing chemistry in Graz, only to follow my father's path into law. My journey brought me back to Salzburg's courts and eventually to my own legal practice in Linz. It was during these formative years that I delved into Austrian nationalism and began to shape my political identity. Yet, it wasn't just my ideological stance that was forming. My physical appearance, marked by scars, some say from fencing, others claim a car accident, combined with my towering height, gave me a presence that many found imposing. This visage, as much as my actions, would come to define how the world saw Ernst Kaltenbrunner. As I delved deeper into the legal profession in the late 1920s, just across our border in Germany, chaos reigned. The aftermath of World War I saw Germany engulfed in turmoil and revolution. It was against this backdrop that the National Socialist German Workers' Party, known as the Nazi Party, emerged in Bavaria in 1920. Founded on resentment towards the Treaty of Versailles and fueled by anti-Semitic and anti-communist rhetoric, this group, led by a fellow Austrian, Adolf Hitler, sought a dramatic reversal of Germany's fortunes. The tumultuous years saw failed coups such as the Beer Hall Putsch of 1923 and the subsequent rise of the Nazis from the fringes to a formidable force in German politics. Meanwhile, in Austria, my own political affiliations deepened. My family's nationalist leanings resonated with my involvement in far-right groups during my university days in Graz, culminating in my legal representation of the Austrian Nazi Party in 1929. By October 1930, it was a natural progression for me to officially join the Nazi Party, aligning with its growing influence in both Germany and Austria. The Great Depression, following the Wall Street crash of 1929, only intensified the allure of extremist groups. In this desperate climate, I ascended the ranks of the Austrian Nazi Party, becoming a significant district official in Upper Austria. And, in 1931, joining the SS, the paramilitary wing of the Nazis. The Nazi Party's trajectory in Germany was meteoric. By 1933, Hitler had maneuvered his way into the chancellorship, transforming Germany into a one-party dictatorship. In Austria, however, the situation was more complex. Despite modest gains in the 1930 elections, the Nazi Party's Austrian branch leveraged the 1931 bankruptcy of Credit Anstalt, a bank with Jewish origins, to fuel anti-Semitic sentiments and gain traction. Yet, our rise in Austria was halted in spring 1933. Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss, wary of Hitler's ambitions for German-Austrian unification and influenced by Mussolini's fascism in Italy, suspended parliamentary democracy and established the Fatherland Front. This move was aimed at bringing stability to Austria and curbing the growth of Nazism. By the early 1930s, I had risen to a position of significant influence within the Austrian Nazi movement. My efforts, alongside figures like Arthur Seyss-Inquart, were focused on undermining the Austrian political system from within. Our communication with Heinrich Himmler was frequent and strategic. However, my subversive activities did not go unnoticed. In January 1934, just days after my marriage to Elisabeth Eder, I was arrested for conspiring against the state. My imprisonment in Kaisersteinbruch, alongside approximately 50,000 other Austrians arrested for Nazi associations, marked a turbulent period. Amidst hunger strikes and riots, the detention center was eventually abandoned, and I was released in May 1934. The assassination of Austrian Chancellor Dollfuss in July 1934 by Nazi agents was a pivotal moment. Whether I had foreknowledge of this plan remains unclear. Dollfuss's successor, Kurt Schuschnigg, continued the struggle against Austrian Nazism, but our operations, often based out of Bavaria, intensified. My travels to Passau and my growing involvement with the SS saw me passing intelligence to Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich, while evading several arrests for treason. As Hitler's Germany blatantly violated the Treaty of Versailles by rearming, the pressure on Austria mounted. The idea of Anschluss, a union between Germany and Austria, was increasingly championed by Hitler. Schuschnigg, in a desperate bid to counter this growing tide, planned a referendum on the issue in 1938. But before it could take place, Hitler ordered German troops into Austria. The groundwork laid by Austrian Nazis like Seyss-Inquart and myself ensured a smooth transition. The Anschluss was a fait accompli, ratified by a plebiscite with a staggering 99% approval, a vote from which our political opponents were barred. In the wake of this unification, rewards for our dedication to the Nazi cause were plentiful. I was appointed Minister of Public Security in Austria, promoted within the SS, and took my place in the German Reichstag. My role expanded to overseeing the persecution of Jewish communities and the establishment of the Gestapo in Vienna. One of my most significant contributions was the establishment of the Mauthausen concentration camp, the first of its kind in Austria. Here, a myriad of perceived enemies of the state were detained, subjected to inhumane conditions, and forced into labor for the Nazi war machine. The horrors of Mauthausen, which eventually housed 85,000 prisoners and saw nearly half of them perish, are a testament to the brutal efficiency of the system I helped create. While I was deeply involved in the grim task of establishing the Mauthausen-Gusen concentration camp, Europe was inching closer to the abyss. The Anschluss, though a clear violation of the Treaty of Versailles, was met with little opposition from Britain and France, given the overwhelming support for it within Austria. But Hitler's ambitions were far from satisfied. Soon after, attention turned to the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia, home to a significant ethnic German population. Hitler's claim on this territory brought him into conflict with European powers. However, at the Munich summit in September 1938, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, along with French and Italian leaders, conceded the Sudetenland to Germany in a bid to appease Hitler and avoid war. A decision often criticized as misguided, yet it bought crucial time for Britain and France to rearm. The respite was short-lived. By March 1939, Hitler had further dismantled Czechoslovakia and seized the city of Memel from Lithuania. Despite these aggressive moves, it was the looming threat to Poland that finally tipped the balance. Britain and France, committed to defending Poland's sovereignty, declared war on Germany following the German invasion on September 1st, 1939. Thus began the Second World War. Amidst this escalating conflict, my role within the Nazi hierarchy advanced significantly. In early summer of 1940, I was appointed police president of Vienna and promoted within the SS. My primary objective was the expansion of Nazi intelligence services in Austria, aimed at quelling any resistance. The preemptive arrests of approximately 100,000 individuals deemed opponents of the Nazis had already been carried out. Yet, resistance movements like that, led by the Roman Catholic priest Heinrich Meyer, who passed crucial intelligence to the Allies, proved a formidable challenge. Despite limited success in breaking up Meyer's group, my secret police were more effective against others, such as the Austrian Freedom Movement. We eventually identified and apprehended its key members, ensuring their silence in the concentration camps. As I worked to expand our intelligence network and maintain control in wartime Vienna, Germany's military campaigns were reshaping the map of Europe. The swift and brutal conquest of Poland was just the beginning. A seeming lull, termed the Phony War by observers in Britain and France, gave way to a storm of Nazi military advances in 1940. Denmark and Norway fell quickly to our forces, followed by a stunning campaign against France, culminating in the fall of Paris. But these military victories brought about a sinister shift within the Reich, particularly concerning the Jewish population. Since 1933, the Nazi regime had systematically disenfranchised Germany's Jewish community, culminating in the horrific pogroms of Kristallnacht in November 1938. Vienna, with its significant Jewish population, witnessed some of the worst violence. Violence I was deeply involved in orchestrating. The war brought millions more Jews under Nazi control, rendering our previous policy of forced immigration impractical. This led to the development of even more dystopian plans. Adolf Eichmann, a colleague from my school days, proposed the mass deportation of Europe's Jews to Madagascar, a plan ultimately deemed unfeasible. With the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, a chilling decision was made at the highest levels of the Nazi hierarchy. Hitler, Himmler, Heydrich, and others conceived what they called the final solution, a systematic plan for the mass extermination of all Jews in Europe. This horrific strategy began to unfold behind the advancing German army in the Soviet Union. SS death squads, the Einsatzgruppen, committed unspeakable massacres, eradicating entire Jewish communities. This marked the beginning of a dark chapter in human history, as Jews from across Europe were systematically identified, arrested, and transported to concentration camps. The majority of them met a tragic fate upon arrival, a fate sealed by the very ideology and machinery I had helped to build and perpetuate. My involvement in these events was profound and direct. Then, in early summer 1942, a pivotal moment occurred in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Heydrich, known as the man with the Iron Heart, was assassinated following his brutal crackdown on the Czech resistance. His death left a significant void in the Nazi intelligence and policing hierarchy. In January 1943, after much deliberation by Himmler, I was appointed as the head of the Reich Security Main Office, succeeding Heydrich. This promotion was unexpected to many, as it elevated me to a position second only to Himmler within the SS. I also took over as president of the International Criminal Police Commission, the precursor to Interpol. In this capacity, I oversaw an extensive network spanning 7 departments, each responsible for different facets of intelligence and policing. This included the Gestapo, foreign intelligence, and administrative matters across the Reich and occupied territories. My childhood friend, Adolf Eichmann, was part of this intricate system, handling the logistics of transporting Jews to concentration camps. As the head of the Reich Security Main Office, my involvement in the Holocaust deepened. The policies and operations initiated by Heydrich, which I inherited and perpetuated, resulted in the systematic persecution and extermination of millions of Jews and other persecuted groups, including the Romani. This period marked one of the darkest chapters in history, a chapter in which I played a pivotal and devastating role. In the years following the war, I claim to have played only a minor role in the Holocaust and the crimes of the Nazi regime. I argued that I merely inherited a genocidal program that was already in motion. However, historical evidence starkly contradicts these claims. For instance, it was under my leadership, after Heydrich's assassination, that the Reich Security Main Office implemented the policy of Schutzhaft, or protective custody. This policy expedited the transfer of designated individuals to concentration camps, significantly accelerating the systematic murder of Jews, Romani, and other groups. Directives for the continuation of mass executions using Zyklon B and carbon monoxide were issued from my office to the commandants of major death camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, and Sobibor. These orders were integral to the most intense period of the Holocaust during 1943 and 1944. The final solution, agreed upon in 1941, escalated rapidly under my supervision. The mass deportation and murder of 60,000 Jews from occupied Greece, the liquidation of Jewish ghettos in the Baltic states and Belarusia, and the commencement of the persecution of Italian Jews. All these atrocities intensified after I became head of the Reich Security Main Office. My own extreme anti-Semitic views were well documented. I once described the eradication of Jews in Italy as a matter of special interest. This leaves no doubt about my central role in these genocidal policies. Simultaneously, the war was turning against the Nazis. The invasion of Russia had faltered, and by the end of 1942, the German Sixth Army was encircled at Stalingrad, facing imminent defeat. My appointment to this high-ranking position coincided with a crucial juncture in the war, a time when it was increasingly clear that the tide was turning against Germany. As the Reich Security Main Office's head, my tenure began just as the tide of war was turning against us. The surrender at Stalingrad, mere weeks after my appointment, marked the first significant defeat for German arms. The Russian advance westwards and the opening of a southern front by the Western Allies in Italy signaled the inevitable approach of Germany's defeat. Amidst this shifting tide, I found myself advocating for Otto Skorzeny, an Austrian-born SS officer with a growing reputation for audacity. Recognizing his potential, I endorsed him for several critical missions in 1943. One such mission, the Gran Sasso Raid, became infamous for its daring rescue of the deposed Italian leader Benito Mussolini from captivity. Skorzeny's success in this operation not only solidified his status as Germany's premier special operations commander, but also demonstrated my ability to identify and leverage key personnel in dire times. Late in 1943, I was instrumental in orchestrating one of the war's most audacious plans, Operation Long Jump. This top-secret initiative aimed to assassinate the 3 principal Allied leaders, Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin, during their conference in Tehran. Skorzeny was my choice to execute this bold operation. We established a special training facility in Copenhagen and prepared to deploy units to Tehran. There were even plans to capture Roosevelt alive, intending to use him as leverage in peace negotiations with the United States. However, the entire operation unraveled when a Soviet agent uncovered its details, thwarting our plans before they could be set into motion. As the war's conclusion drew nearer, it became increasingly clear that those of us in positions of power within the Nazi regime would have to answer for our actions. The impending defeat of Germany cast a long shadow over us, a shadow from which there would be no escape. During my tenure as head of the Reich Security Main Office, I pushed for the intensification of existing laws against homosexuality. Although homosexuality had been illegal in Germany even before the Nazis' rise to power, it was our regime that turned it into a severe crime, ruthlessly enforced. Over 100,000 individuals were arrested for homosexuality from 1933 to 1945, with about half convicted and many sentenced to lengthy prison terms. In a chilling escalation of these policies, I advocated for the mandatory castration of males convicted of homosexual acts. Although I withdrew the formal proposal, not out of a change of heart, but due to logistical reasons, the Gestapo effectively coerced many into voluntarily opting for chemical castration as an alternative to concentration camps. Estimates suggest that over 800 men were castrated under these conditions. My role in the Holocaust reached a harrowing zenith, with the extension of the final solution to Hungary in 1944. Alongside Adolf Eichmann, I was instrumental in the deportation and mass murder of over 400,000 Hungarian Jews in just a few months. The majority were sent to Auschwitz, where the crematoriums operated at their limits, exterminating thousands daily. The assassination attempt on Hitler on July 20, 1944, marked another critical moment. Led by Klaus von Stauffenberg, this nearly successful plot aimed to eliminate Hitler and initiate a coup. However, the bomb only wounded Hitler, and the ensuing revolt was quickly crushed. In the chaotic aftermath, I was summoned to Berlin. The regime was reeling, yet my commitment to its brutal policies remained unwavering, even as the war spiraled towards its inevitable conclusion. In the aftermath of the July 20th assassination attempt, as the chief of the Reich's security forces, I was summoned to Berlin to spearhead the investigations. My efforts led to a wide-reaching purge, ensnaring thousands in a web of suspicion and reprisal. Approximately 5,000 individuals were executed, and many more were thrust into the already overcrowded concentration camps. My zealous pursuit of those involved in the assassination plot earned me high honors within the Nazi regime, including the Knight's Cross to the War Merit Cross with swords, the prestigious Blood Order, and the Golden Party Badge. These accolades signified not just my loyalty, but also my ascension to the zenith of my power. By December 1944, Himmler promoted me to General of the Waffen-SS, a strategic move reflecting the dire state of the war. The war's progression was undeniably against us. The Western Allies had established a formidable front in France, and the Soviet forces were relentlessly pushing westward. In these bleak circumstances, I, along with other high-ranking Nazis, began seeking avenues to negotiate surrender terms, preferably with the Western Allies over the Soviet Union. We believed the West might offer more lenient terms, considering the immense suffering and losses incurred by the Soviet Union. In late 1944, I initiated contact with the International Red Cross in neutral Switzerland. My meeting with Karl Jacob Burckhardt in March 1945 was a last-ditch effort to explore potential surrender options. However, these negotiations led nowhere, and I was not alone in these desperate diplomatic endeavors. Many senior Nazis were similarly engaged. As the war neared its inevitable end, I was involved in one final, desperate act. As the war spiraled towards its conclusion, my role shifted yet again. On April 18th, amidst the Allies' encroachment, Himmler appointed me as the commander of the Southern Armies. This command, however, was largely symbolic, as the forces in Austria and surrounding areas were isolated and faced minimal Allied opposition. In these final days, I attempted to organize a guerrilla resistance, preparing the remaining Nazi soldiers and SS members for a post-war insurgency. Concurrently, I became embroiled in an unusual dispute over a vast collection of looted artworks in Upper Austria, preventing their destruction at the hands of the local Nazi governor. Meanwhile, as the Soviet forces encircled Berlin and the Western Allies advanced into Germany, Hitler remained resolute in his refusal to surrender despite the inevitable outcome. The battle for Berlin was fierce but brief. On April 30th, with the Russians closing in, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker, followed by Goebbels the next day. Admiral Karl Donitz, appointed as Germany's new president, was left to negotiate the surrender, which was formalized on May 8, 1945. By this time, I was a fugitive, having fled to the Austrian Alps with a small group of SS officers, including my deputy Arthur Scheidler. With false identities and in a remote mountain cabin, we sought to evade capture by the Allies. But the fall of the Third Reich was complete, and the time for reckoning was at hand. In my final act of defiance, I discarded my official seal as head of the Reich Security Main Office into an alpine lake, a futile gesture as the end was near. On May 12, 1945, our hideout was discovered by the US 80th Infantry Division. Despite our false identities, it was only a matter of time before I was recognized, given my distinct facial scars and high-profile position. Captured and facing imminent trial, I was thrust into the heart of a significant moment in history. The Allies, in the wake of the war, grappled with the question of justice. It was decided that collective punishment was unjust. Many Germans had no direct involvement in the Nazi regime's crimes. Instead, the focus would be on prosecuting Nazi leaders, officials, and SS members responsible for instigating the war and committing heinous crimes against humanity. As a high-ranking Nazi official and a senior member of the SS, I was a prime candidate for prosecution. With the suicide of Heinrich Himmler shortly after my capture, I inadvertently became the highest-ranking SS officer to stand trial. The Nuremberg trials, beginning in November 1945, were a meticulous process aimed at showcasing the full extent of the Nazi regime's atrocities. Alongside prominent figures like Hermann Göring, Joachim von Ribbentrop, Rudolf Hess, and Albert Speer, I was one of the main defendants. This trial was not just about seeking justice for the unspeakable crimes committed, but also about sending a message to the world about the consequences of such actions. As the Nuremberg trials commenced, I was temporarily absent, receiving treatment for a brain hemorrhage. When I finally appeared in court, I vehemently denied my involvement in the atrocities, claiming that my signature on incriminating documents had been forged and insisting that my role as head of the RSHA was merely symbolic. But the evidence against me was overwhelming, and the court saw through my defenses. In the end, I was found guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Along with 8 other high-ranking Nazis, I was sentenced to death. On October the 16th, 1946, as I stood on the scaffold, my final words echoed my persistent denial of any knowledge of the regime's crimes. But the verdict had been passed and the sentence was carried out. Following our execution, our remains were cremated and scattered in the river Isar, near the Austrian border. It was a symbolic end to a dark chapter in history, an attempt to ensure that the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime would never be repeated. As our journey together comes to an end, I leave you with thoughts that echo through the annals of history. You have witnessed the rise and fall of a regime, the unfolding of war, and the inevitable march towards justice. These events, dark as they are, hold lessons that are timeless and universal. I urge you to reflect on what you have seen and heard. Consider the impact of power, the price of ambition, and the eternal necessity for humanity and justice. If this journey through the shadows of history has moved you, if it has made you ponder the complexities of human nature and the course of events, then I invite you to express your thoughts. Leave a comment with your reflections. And, if you found this journey enlightening, do not hesitate to like and subscribe. Share this video to continue the conversation and bring more people into this crucial dialogue. Together, let us keep the memory alive and ensure that the lessons of history remain a guiding light for generations to come. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and never forget.